Like and subscribe may look simple to you, but for us it's very valuable. So make sure to support us, and thank you for watching.
Kazutaka Hyudu, the wealthy head of Tei Corporation, gathers his employees to pose a critical question: what grants someone the ultimate power? His staff throws out different ideas, mentioning things like military strength and control over markets. Rinko and Do suggest that money is the key, but Kazutaka quickly shuts her down, calling that answer too shallow. What really matters is how you use wealth. Yûki Otonegawa, on the other hand, earns praise from Kazutaka for saying that true power lies in having enough financial strength to build your own kingdom, like a secure fallout shelter. He also points out that Japan is filled with hopeless young men who could be used as labor to make this happen. Meanwhile, Kaiji Itu moves through his day. He buys lottery scratch-offs, losing again as usual. He got angry by his loss and then went to his work. He spends his time at his boring job as a cashier in a convenience store. He read magazines and cleaned the store to spend his time, but it was still boring. On the walk home, Kaiji grows more frustrated as he was almost hit by an expensive car which was passing by. He mutters to himself, believing the wealthy people inside don't earn their money through hard work but by cheating the system, like avoiding taxes. Fed up, Kaiji kicks a nearby Mercedes. This leads to a chase as bodyguards rush out of the car to catch him. Among them, Rinko and Do appears, and instead of punishing him, she invites him to come along and talk. Rinko placed a contract in front of Kaiji, reminding him of a commitment he made years ago. He had signed as a guarantor for a friend's loan, but that friend had disappeared, leaving Kaiji to bear the full responsibility of the debt. What started as a manageable 300,000 yen had ballooned into an overwhelming 2 million due to accumulating interest, not to mention the cost of the car damage he caused earlier. Kaiji tried to offer excuses, but Rinko cut him off, stating firmly that there was no escaping it. He had to pay. Desperate, Kaiji apologized, admitting he had no way of gathering such a massive amount. Seeing his hopelessness, Rinko proposed a way out. There was a high-stakes gambling cruise filled with others in debt like him. If he managed to win, his debt would be completely forgiven. She then coldly pointed out how miserable his life had become, reminding him he had nothing to show for himself and was already 30 years old. Her brutal words cut deep, and Kaiji couldn't hold back his tears. But despite the cruelty, Rinko made it clear that this was his chance to turn his life around. With no other options, Kaiji finally agreed. Later that night, he raced to the shore, spotting the massive cruise ship that would soon determine his fate. As he stepped aboard, he found himself surrounded by others like him, desperate and broken. Back at the company, Rinko handed in Kaiji's profile, satisfied with filling her quota. Meanwhile, Kaiji wandered the cruise, trying to make sense of the situation. Soon, everyone was called to gather by the stage. Yûki Otonegawa, the host of the evening, appeared to explain the rules. He announced that each participant would receive 3 stars, each worth 1 million yen, though they would accrue interest at a rate of 1% every minute. If someone won the game, not only would the company erase their debt, but they would also buy back the stars. Grumbles of disagreement filled the room, but Yukio quickly silenced them, reminding everyone of the crushing debt they were already burdened with. The game itself was deceptively simple, a series of rock-paper-scissors rounds. Each player received 12 cards, and for every round they won, they would take a star from their opponent. The objective was to use all 12 cards and end up with at least 3 stars within 30 minutes. After laying out the rules, Yukio informed them that no further explanations would be given and no questions would be entertained. The participants erupted in protest, shouting that their lives were at stake, but Yukio coldly dismissed them. He mocked them as pathetic, selfish failures, reminding them of the reckless choices that had brought them here. His harsh words stung deeply, and some of the players couldn't help but cry under the weight of their situation. With a final biting remark, Yukio declared that winning was all that mattered and left them to begin the game. As the game begins, chaos erupts in the room. All the players scramble to find an opponent, but Kaiji stands frozen, watching the frenzy around him. Amid the commotion, one unlucky player is grabbed by the guards, dragged away while pleading to stay, and tossed out of the room. As Kaiji processes the situation, he's approached by a man named Juji Funai, who proposes a deal. Funai suggests that they can play to draw by using the same cards in each round, allowing them to avoid losing any stars while quickly getting rid of their cards. He warns Kaiji that losing means being taken to another ship where he'd be treated like a slave, or worse, leaving empty-handed. Funai pleads for them to survive together. Kaiji, desperate for any sort of strategy, agrees, and they begin playing. At first, everything goes smoothly, with both players discarding their cards without any issues, but just as things seem to be going well, Funai betrays him. In a crucial moment, Funai plays to win, taking one of Kaiji's stars. He quickly apologizes, claiming it was an honest mistake, and even promises to go back to their plan. Reluctantly, Kaiji agrees, only to be tricked again when Funai once more plays to win, leaving Kaiji with only one star and one card. As Kaiji stares in disbelief, Funai reveals his betrayal with a smug grin, mocking him before walking off. Boiling with anger, Kaiji throws down his last card and punches Funai, knocking him to the floor and causing him to bleed. The guards rush in to break up the fight, but when Kaiji tries to explain what happened, the guards simply ignore him, leaving Kaiji's protests unheard. The room grows tense as Funai, now seeking revenge, loudly announces to everyone that Kaiji's last card is scissors, encouraging them to go after him for an easy star. In response, Kaiji shouts back that Funai only has rock left, turning the situation into a chaotic argument. The other players start debating whether either of them is telling the truth or setting up a trap. Their dispute is interrupted when a guard drags back Kuji Yoshida, who had been caught trying to flush his cards, down the toilet in a desperate attempt to escape the game. Lying on the floor, Yoshida admits he knew he couldn't win and had no other choice. With only 10 minutes remaining, Funai seizes the opportunity to suggest a new plan, a reshuffle of all the remaining cards, ensuring that no one knows what anyone else has left. The players, eager for a chance to reset, agree, including Kaiji, who has something else in mind. Secretly, he tells Yoshida he will help him, and then he approaches Funai, pretending to be on his side. Funai collects all the cards, shuffles them, and hands each player back the same number they had before. When Kaiji receives his cards, he notices one stained with blood from his earlier punch. With that clue, Kaiji hatches a plan and teams up with Yoshida for a one-card showdown against Funai, betting everything on a chance to win 3 stars in one final match. Funai is confident he will win, certain he knows Kaiji's last card. However, Kaiji has anticipated this and easily defeats him. This was Kaiji's plan all along. Knowing that Funai would notice the bloodstain on his card from their earlier scuffle, Kaiji cleverly swapped out his own card. He took one of Yoshida's cards and smeared it with blood, making Funai believe it was Kaiji's marked card. When Funai played, thinking he had outsmarted Kaiji, he unknowingly fell into Kaiji's trap and lost the round. Furious, Funai erupted in anger, trying to argue and fight, but the guards quickly intervened and threw him out of the room. With Funai gone, Kaiji and Yoshida divide the stars they won from him, ensuring that both now have 3 stars each. Feeling victorious, they prepare to finish the game by tying their final match on purpose, believing they've secured their win. Just as they start celebrating, thinking the game is over, Yoshida makes a shocking discovery. He finds a card hidden in his pocket that he had completely forgotten about. Realizing the mistake, Kaiji, true to his promise of sticking with Yoshida as a team, accepts responsibility for the extra card as well. But this means the rules have been broken, and instead of winning, both of them lose the game. They are taken to work in the deep underground, forced into hard labor for the construction of Hyuru's so-called kingdom. Kaiji describes the terrible condition they endure. The hours stretch endlessly, there are no breaks, their meals are meager and unappetizing, and at night they all crowd together in a cramped space, sleeping directly on the cold floor. As if things couldn't get worse, each worker is branded with a microchip implanted in their shoulders, ensuring there's no chance of escape. When payday finally comes, Kaiji eagerly opens his envelope, but to his shock, the money inside isn't what he expected. Confused, he asks what kind of currency it is. The man handing out the paychecks explains that it's their own underground currency called Perika, which is only valid within the underground world. To make matters worse, its value is a mere tenth of a yen. This means that Kaiji's daily salary comes out to only 350 yen, which is barely $3. Furious, Kaiji feels feels the weight of the injustice, but he knows there's nothing he can do. Despite the paltry amount, Kaiji considers saving every bit of his earnings in the hopes of slowly paying off his massive debt. However, temptations arrive almost immediately. A cart rolls by, offering beer and greasy food that smells too good to resist. At first, Kaiji fights the urge, determined to stick to his plan, but when the foreman offers him a gift of a free beer and whispers enticingly about how good the food is, Kaiji breaks. He buys the beer, convincing himself it's just a small reward. The seller encourages him further, saying beer goes best with a side of chicken. Even though Kaiji tries to refuse, the foreman steps in again, praising Kaiji and suggesting he deserves to treat himself. In the end, Kaiji gives in completely, blowing nearly all his hard-earned money on snacks and more beer. As he indulges, he realizes too late that most of the other workers do the same. This is how the company keeps them trapped, constantly working, yet never able to save enough to leave. The next day, Kaiji returns to work with deep regret, kicking himself for wasting his money. But before he can dwell on it too long, a sudden earthquake shakes the underground, causing panic. During the chaos, Ishida, one of Kaiji's fellow workers, is injured. Kaiji rushes to get him to the infirmary, but once there, he is horrified to find that most of the injured aren't receiving any treatment. The reason? They need to pay for medicine with Perika. At the infirmary, Kaiji and Ishida meet Makoto Sahara, another worker who reveals a disturbing truth. He overheard the foreman mocking them, laughing about how the entire system is rigged to ensure they fail, keeping them trapped in an endless cycle of debt and labor. The grim realization weighs heavily on them, and hope begins to fade. But before they give up entirely, the doctor offers a small glimmer of hope. He mentions that soon they will begin selecting people for something called the Brave Men Road. The doctor explains that the Brave Men Road is the only possible way out for them. The next time the snack cart arrives, Kaiji can't hold back anymore. He confronts the foreman, accusing him of tricking everyone into a false sense of hope, and calls on his fellow workers to wake up from the illusion they're living in, a dream that will never come true. Before the argument can escalate, guards suddenly appear to take Sahara away, announcing that he's been selected for the Brave Men Road. It's a terrifying game where winning means freedom, but losing means certain death. Despite the danger, Kaiji boldly steps forward, volunteering to go as well, and Ishida follows suit. Determined, Kaiji rallies the others with an impassioned speech, urging them not to give up and to fight for a way out of this miserable existence. All of the chosen participants are blindfolded, their hands bound as they're led to an unknown destination. Even though they can't see, Kaiji senses they're being transported in a vehicle, followed by an elevator ride. When their blindfolds are finally removed, they find themselves standing on the rooftop of a towering skyscraper. As they try to comprehend the situation, Yukio arrives, ready to explain the rules once again. Each player is handed a voucher worth 10 million yen. But Yukio smirks, mocking their excitement. To claim the prize, they must cross to the hotel on the opposite side of the street by walking across two narrow beams. Initially, the players are paralyzed with fear, believing the task to be impossible, and they shout at Yukio in frustration. But Kaiji steps forward, declaring that he will attempt the crossing, sparking the others to follow his lead. Seeing their determination, Yukio activates another cruel twist. He electrifies the beams, ensuring they can't crawl across for safety. The only way to succeed is to walk upright and maintain perfect balance. This sadistic rule not only makes the challenge more dangerous, but also provides more entertainment for the wealthy socialites watching the deadly game unfold as reality TV. Yukio returns to the hotel where he and Rinko are hosting the spectacle for the elite audience, broadcasting every moment of the deadly event. Back on the rooftop, Kaiji draws lines on everyone's shoes, showing them how to align with the center of the beam for better balance. Nervously, the group begins their perilous journey across the beams. Every step is tense, the players' minds racing with fear of the drop below. Kaiji keeps repeating to himself that he can do it, but at one point he nearly loses his balance. He wobbles, but manages to steady himself just before falling. Suddenly, a nearby lightning strike signals an incoming storm, heightening everyone's anxiety. One of the players is too scared to continue and begs for help, but Sahara coldly refuses. Without assistance, the terrified man loses his footing, is electrocuted, and plummets to his death. The sight of the man's fall shatters the group's morale. One by one, other players succumb to their fear, slipping from the beams and falling to their deaths, each drop cheered on by the heartless spectators. The cruelty of it all disgusts Rinko, who watches the senseless deaths unfold. As the rain begins to pour down on them, the situation grows even more dire. Sahara and Ishida are on the verge of giving up, tears streaming down their faces as the wind beats against them, making the beams sway even more dangerously. Kaiji tries to encourage Ishida, but the storm continues to rage. Determined to keep going, Kaiji pushes forward, but Ishida, sensing the end, admits that he can't go on any longer. He hands Kaiji his voucher, pleading with him to win and send the money to his daughter. He tells Kaiji he doesn't want to live like this anymore, and that Kaiji must succeed for them both. With a heavy heart, Kaiji turns to keep walking, not realizing that Ishida has made his final decision. In complete silence, Ishida lets himself fall, sparing Kaiji the panic of watching his friend's final moment. When Kaiji finally turns back, he is devastated to see that Ishida is gone. Overcome with grief, Kaiji collapses, crying uncontrollably at the loss of his friend, broken by the weight of the death he couldn't prevent. Sahara and Kaiji successfully cross the beams, reaching the door of the hotel. However, Kaiji's sense of unease grows when he notices Hyudu watching them from a nearby window. His instincts prove correct as they face one last cruel trick. As soon as Sahara opens the door, a powerful gust of wind, caused by the difference in air pressure, throws him off balance. He falls to his death before he can react. Kaiji, too, slips, but he manages to grab onto the ledge just in time. Fighting through his shock and grief, he pulls himself back up and becomes the first person to ever survive Brave Men Road. Tears stream down his face as he watches Sahara fall. Hyudu congratulates Kaiji on his success and rewards Yukio, granting him citizenship in his twisted kingdom for providing such an entertaining show. Kaiji seethes with anger, disgusted that they see this deadly ordeal as mere entertainment, indifferent to the lives lost. Still fuming, Kaiji demands his prize money, but the news he receives is devastating. Ishida's voucher is declared invalid since he's now dead, and from the 10 million yen Kaiji supposedly won, a huge portion is deducted to cover his debt. In the end, all Kaiji is left with is a measly 750,000 yen. Enraged, Kaiji charges at Yukio, but the guards quickly step in to stop him. Rinko coldly tells Kaiji that at least he has his freedom, but Kaiji's frustration grows, knowing he can't fulfill his promise to send money to Ishida's daughter. Hyudu, amused by Kaiji's rebellious spirit, offers him one last chance, a new game called E-Cards. This time, Kaiji's opponent will be Yukio himself. The game involves each player receiving 5 cards, 4 citizens, and either an emperor or a slave. The rules are simple but brutal. The slave team plays a card first, followed by the emperor team. The outcome is decided by these basic rules. Citizen versus citizen is a draw. Citizen beats slave, emperor beats citizen, but slave beats emperor. However, Kaiji is at a disadvantage. He must choose and play his card first, making it easier for his opponent to read his intentions. The game consists of 3 rounds with a 10-to-1 bet, meaning the slave side holds the higher risk. Despite the odds, Kaiji chooses to play as the slave, knowing the risks but hoping the reward will be worth it. The match is so significant that it's even broadcasted on underground TV. Kaiji begins cautiously, playing 2 citizens and resulting in 2 draws. But when he plays the slave card, Yukio instantly picks up on it and defeats him. Hyudo, disappointed that the game ended so quickly, loans Kaiji more money for a second attempt. Kaiji begins to observe Yukio carefully during the second round, noticing something strange. Yukio never looks directly at him or even at his own cards. Sensing something is off, Kaiji decides to change his strategy, playing the slave card again to catch Yukio off guard. Yet to Kaiji's shock, Yukio still manages to tell and defeats him with ease. As Kaiji prepares to be taken away by the guards, he notices something peculiar. Yukio is wearing a different watch than before. With this small detail stuck in his mind, Kaiji begins to replay the events of the game in his head, desperately searching for the trick. Rinko appears, mocking him and calling him a branded loser. In that moment, it all clicks. Kaiji realizes the microchip implanted in his arm is being used to monitor his vital signs. items. Yukio's watch is designed to read Kaiji's physical reactions, allowing him to know exactly when Kaiji plays a risky card. Despair takes hold of Kaiji as he cries out, believing his future will be spent trapped underground. But as he recalls all the tricks and betrayals he's faced, a new plan begins to form in his mind. Kaiji asks for permission to go to the bathroom before leaving, and once inside he calls for Rinko, knowing she's waiting just outside the door. When Rinko enters, Kaiji pleads with her, explaining his new plan and appealing to the part of her that might still hold some goodness. He convinces her to lend him 50 million yen for one last round, promising her that this time he will win. Against all odds, Rinko agrees, sensing something different in Kaiji's determination. She escorts him back to the game room, where Hyudo, thoroughly entertained by this unexpected turn of events, orders Yukio to play against Kaiji once more. Before the game begins, Kaiji slams his head against a mirror several times, causing his vitals to spike and become erratic. Yukio, relying on his watch to read Kaiji's reactions, is thrown off as the device now shows wild numbers, making it impossible to get a clear read on Kaiji's emotions. At the table, Kaiji discreetly takes 3 cards and hides them on his lap, making a quick switch while Yukio isn't paying attention. When he puts the cards back on the table, 2 of them end up stained with blood from his head injury as he shakes off the pain. For the first time, Yukio starts to feel nervous. He realizes that without the watch, he can't rely on his usual tactics. The game begins, and the first round results in both players putting down citizen cards, leading to a draw. Tension builds as they enter the second round. This time, Kaiji plays one of the bloodstained cards, which catches Yukio's attention. Yukio remembers that when the cards were bloodied, the remaining 2 were either the slave or a citizen. He plays a citizen, betting on the 50-50 chance. The round ends in another draw as Kaiji's card is also a citizen. This leaves Yukio feeling more confident, convinced that the next bloodstained card must be the slave. After another citizen draw, both players are left with 2 cards. Kaiji plays the second bloodstained card, and Yukio is sure this is the moment. He's ready to play a citizen, believing Kaiji's card is the slave, but then he hesitates. He remembers Kaiji must have seen the bloodstain as well, and this is the same kind of trick Kaiji had pulled during the earlier cruise game. Realizing Kaiji may have swapped the cards after hiding the first 3, Yukio becomes certain the card on the table now is a citizen, not the slave. Feeling confident in his deduction, Yukio plays the Emperor card, believing he has outsmarted Kaiji. But the moment the cards are revealed, Yukio is stunned. Kaiji had played the slave card, securing an unexpected victory. The shock is written all over Yukio's face, while Kaiji sits calmly, explaining that he never actually swapped the cards. The whole act of hiding and switching was nothing more than a bluff meant to manipulate Yukio's overconfidence. As Kaiji's victory is broadcasted, the workers in the underground celebrate, cheering for the man who outwitted Yukio and finally turned the tide. Yudu, furious with Yukio for losing a significant amount of money, reacts harshly. He strikes Yukio with his cane in a fit of rage, and as punishment, he strips Yukio of his citizenship in the kingdom. Yudu condemns him to spend the rest of his life working in the brutal underground labor system, a fate Yukio once helped impose on others. The next day, Kaiji and Rinko celebrate their victory over a lavish lunch. As they divide the money, Kaiji feels a sense of relief and triumph, finally tasting the fruits of his hard-fought battle. However, the celebration is short-lived. Without warning, Kaiji suddenly passes out, his drink having been spiked by Rinko. When he regains consciousness hours later, he finds that all the money bags are gone, along with Rinko herself. She has vanished without a trace, leaving behind only a letter. In the letter, Rinko explains her actions. She took all the money because Kaiji had neglected to account for the enormous interest accumulating per minute on the loan, as well as the remaining payment for the damage Kaiji caused to her car earlier. By the time those debts were settled, Kaiji was left with a mere 450,000 yen. Stunned and panicked, Kaiji realizes he's been swindled, left with far less than he anticipated. Meanwhile, Rinko speeds away in her car, satisfied with her deception. As she drives off, she tosses her company pass out of the window, symbolizing her freedom and newfound wealth. She revels in her success, leaving Kaiji to pick up the pieces of yet another bitter defeat.
And with that, the movie ends. We hope you enjoyed our recap. Watch other recaps on the screen. Like the video and subscribe to our channel for more amazing recaps. See you in the next one.